Welcome to the Good Fit Careers podcast, where we explore perspectives on work that fits. I'm Ryan Dickerson, your host. Today's guest is Travis Peace. Travis is the president and co-founder of Novum Home Loans, an Austin, Texas-based startup focused on providing great advice to borrowers and real estate agents and making the process of getting a new home loan as easy as possible. Travis started his career in the United States Navy after graduating from the Naval Academy. Travis served as a surface warfare officer and then as a nuclear engineer before beginning his career in the private sector. Travis, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So Travis, as we think about your current job today, I'd love for you to take a moment to explain what it is that you do and where you fit within your organization.
Yeah, so I'm the co-founder and president of Novum Home Loans. Myself and my two co-founders each provide a unique aspect to building out Novum Home Loans. I'm responsible for the growth. One of my other co-founders is responsible for the back-end operations and finance. And our third co-founder is responsible for sales and service, the day-to-day, like what the mortgage process actually looks like from a sales perspective and from an operations perspective. And, it's exciting. We're brand new it's a brand new company. Things are going well for us right now, but we're excited for the future and we really think we're onto something.
So you started the company about a year ago. If I understand correctly, you have roughly 8 employees kind of on your way to double digits. Tell me a little bit about where you fit and, along with your co-founders, what the structure of your business looks like.
Yeah. So think of a triangle is kind of how me and my two co-founders have come together. So, I have more of a background in marketing, business development, and growth, and all, everything that kind of falls, sales, enablement, all those types of things. One of my other business partners has much more of a background in operations, finance, and kind of how the back end mechanics of mortgage works. And then the third co-founder, who's a very critical piece to this, has real world sales and operational experience where, he's the guy that just knows how to make the widgets, and how to create how to talk to a real estate agent or a buyer, put a loan transaction together, and then see that it actually closes on time. So the three of us have each part that you need to create a successful mortgage company. And now we're off to the races. And so far, so good. It seems like, we're on to something.
Right on. To get a sense of who you are as a person, and then we'll hear about your whole journey. I'd love to learn a little bit more about what were you like as a kid and, what were your aspirations? What did you want to be when you grew up?
Yeah. Wow. So I definitely did not want to be a mortgage guy when I grew up, and not even,
Sure.
and aspirations to be in the military or anything. I'm from from Texas, from the San Antonio area. Got 2 brothers, and I was kind of that typical, how you would expect a young, a boy from Texas to be raised. A lot of sports, a lot of outdoors, Texas stuff, hunting, fishing, all that type of stuff. I got lucky with good parents who exposed me to just a lot of there was no path that they tried to set me or any of my brothers on. They just kind of let us, figure things out for ourselves. But there was a huge emphasis on education and taking our schooling seriously. And so, I was lucky enough where I got good grades and I was good enough at football that's what got me into the Naval Academy. But, I was good enough at football that, I knew I was going to be I had opportunities to play at the college level, but I didn't really have aspirations or expectations that I'd play in the NFL. So, my parents did a great job of helping. I do think they kind of helped steer me towards a decision of where to play football that would set me up for a career. And in the late 90s, from San Antonio, you got David Robinson, Roger Staubach as a Cowboys fan, just the Naval Academy, the allure of it was just, too great to pass up. So that's really how I landed at Naval Academy and kind of where my winding journey, how it started. It was really just, I decided to go to a great school that gave me an opportunity to play football, and that I thought could set me up for the rest of my life.
As a kid, did you want to be a professional athlete?
I mean, sure, every boy wants to be a professional athlete. But, as you get into high school and so I started going to some of these camps, and I'm in Texas. So, I'm going to camps with guys that are at UT and A&M. And, I started to see, I'm pretty good for San Antonio, but when you when you stack me up against some of these dudes from Houston and Dallas, all right, I can kind of see where I fit in.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. And the Naval Academy is not the easiest school to get into, nor the easiest school to graduate from. Could you give the audience just a little bit of perspective on how competitive it is to actually get into the Naval Academy? And then tell us a little bit about what your experience was like transitioning from San Antonio, having sports and hunting and fishing as kind of your life to being in the academy?
Yeah, it's one of the hardest schools to get into. And I did have an advantage where I had a football. I had the football coaches who kind of helped me navigate through that application process and help, and that's get through that recruiting process. I had never been out of tech. I hadn't been out of Texas more than maybe a week before I landed in Annapolis, Maryland, and it was in late June, and I'm not going to be going home until Thanksgiving. And I didn't know anybody when I got there. But the great thing about the Naval Academy is, for the most part, everybody there is in that exact same situation. I had my roommates were from, New York, Illinois, and the friends that I made were from all over the country. And everybody, it's not like anybody goes there because their girlfriend goes there, or like any of those like, other reasons that you may
Sure.
choose a college because So it just accelerates your maturity, and you have to just really quickly realize, hey man, like if I'm going to succeed here, it's going to be because of me. Like there's nobody that's going to come save me, and everybody's in that same situation. So everybody just kind of naturally learns how to rely on each other, and it just creates this culture of everybody just throughout your 4 years there is just like supporting you. There's not a whole lot of competition on like, hey, I'm trying to beat this person. Everybody knows that it's tough to make it through there, and so everybody helps everybody else, get through there the best way that they can. So I mean, that just stuck with me, right? That's humbling, to have, somebody from a rough upbringing in Chicago who got their opportunity to, get into engineering, who's like helping me with my thermodynamics homework, and like, it just creates this humility. I think that just always stuck with me.
So, Travis, tell us a little bit about why you chose quantitative economics for your degree.
So that's a great question. Because when I went to the academy, I didn't know what I really wanted to do. I knew I had to serve 5 years, at minimum. I didn't really want to make the military a career. And so, I just wanted to, in my mind, as an 18-year-old from Texas, I was like, well, I want to be in business, and okay, like there's no business degree, at the Naval Academy, but I did find that quantitative economics was kind of the closest, most practical type of degree that I thought was closer to, finance, and, something that could give me some advantage, in the civilian world when my military career was over. So that's really what led me to choosing that was, and plus I just always been good at math. It was kind of my thing, and it was a more practical degree than majoring in math. And it was just something that I thought would help set me up for a civilian career.
In terms of your first job out of the Naval Academy, you obviously matriculated into the Navy. What was the transition like from the academy into serving? And then would you tell us a little bit about what it means to be a nuclear engineer?
Yeah. Okay. So this is a good one. Because I chose quantitative economics, that kind of put me in a category that I would, if my grades were good enough, I would be eligible to apply for the nuclear power program. And so, why would anybody ever want to be a nuclear engineer in the Navy? Well, for me, I can say this now, but they offered a $10,000 signing bonus. And when you're
Nice.
21 years old and like they're dangling 10 grand in front of you, like, dude, I can take I could be a nuclear engineer for 5 years. If they give me $10,000 right now, sign
Yeah.
me up. So that
Right
was,
on.
as embarrassing as it is, that was my motivation when I was 21 is, I didn't want to be a pilot. I got motion sickness, so that was out of the question. I didn't really want to be, kicking indoors as a Marine. So I was figured, hey, nuclear engineer also would sound pretty good, when I, was transitioning, out of the military. So as silly as that sounds, that was really the motivation was I thought it would kind of beef up my resume to be able to say I was a nuclear engineer. And honestly, like it was $10,000, which was a lot of money for a 21-year-old back then.
Sure,
I'll
sure.
never forget, man. When I got accepted, once taxes came out, it was $7,300 on the button. Went into my checking account, and I was like, man, it's I'm set for
I have
life.
arrived.
Yeah, I bought so many DVDs that weekend that I got that.
Oh
It
man,
was great.
classic 2000s reference. There we
Yeah,
go.
there you go.
What does it mean to actually be a surface warfare officer? That was the first role that you held for the first 2 years. What do you do in that kind of job?
Yeah, so a surface warfare officer is what you would envision the stereotypical naval officer being. You're up on the bridge with the binoculars, right full rudder, all ahead full, like you're managing the navigation of the ship, the safety of the ship. You're doing all the typical Navy stuff, surface warfare, surface of the water. So you got submarines, surface, and aviation. So surface warfare is ship drivers. That's how it works. And at the time, I graduated in 2003, which if you can remember back then, it was, it was my junior year at the academy, had just started when 9/11 hit. So it was a very different, unclear type of time when I graduated. And so while I was accepted into the nuclear power program in 2003, it was like, hey man, we like the Navy was we're deploying. Like we need help over there. And so I went straight to a ship, got my warfare qualifications. I was on the USS Baton. It was a big deck amphibious assault ship. It's kind of like looks like an aircraft carrier, but it's hollow. And we would launch floating tanks and hovercrafts. They're called HVACs and triple AVs out of the back. Yeah, it was cool. We fly helicopters off the flight deck and Harriers. We had a bunch of Marines on board, so we would. When I was on the Baton, we went over to the Gulf and we stayed in our little imaginary box for a few months off the coast of Kuwait, and we launched Marines into Kuwait and did some pretty, I guess looking back, exciting is probably the best word to use. Some exciting missions back then, but that really shaped a lot of who I was also because you find yourself. I was 22, 23, sitting on the bridge of a $5 billion chunk of the United States Navy, in charge of very risky operations, and you just learn real quick that you better rely on the experts around you to help accomplish whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. And I was lucky that I had some great chief petty officers. Some of the guys on my crew were just really, really good at what they did. And they were very supportive of helping me learn how to be a leader. And that just really stuck with me also, man, was just having just knowing that your job as a leader is to support the experts around you, not to do their job for them, but find the best way that you can support them being the best that they can be. And the Navy kind of throws you into situations where you better learn how to do that or there are dire consequences. That is a very, in hindsight, I was lucky that I had that type of a perspective, pushed on me when I was at that, in those formidable years in my early 20s.
Yeah. Wow. Incredible. After 2 years, you transitioned to nuclear engineering. For the sake of the audience and for my own education, I'm assuming you're not just running an on-land nuclear power plant here. Can you tell me a little bit about what the job actually is and what sort of nuclear engineering you were doing?
So aircraft carriers have two nuclear power plants on them for redundancy purposes that make everything run. You can either have in the Navy, ships can either run on steam generators. There's some that run on diesel generators, and then carriers and submarines run on reactors. So I went to the way that the Navy nuclear power program works is you go to some very intensive class work for about 6 months. And it is 12 hours a day in the classroom, learning everything there is about how to operate a nuclear power plant. So it's not really, you're learning, everything's top secret, but it's not like cool top secret stuff. It's like the math equations behind how, a reactor is designed and, what the tolerances are for pumps and valves, all that kind of stuff. But you really like you have to know in the nuclear power program as a watch officer, you have to know a little bit about everything so that you can rely on your experts who are, the electricians, who are the mechanics, who are the reactor controls guys. But you have to know what they're doing and understand the procedures they're following so that you can make sure that you're giving them the support they need to do their specific detailed expert duty the right way. So you go through 6 months of classwork to learn a little bit about everything. And then you go to what's called a prototype. I went to upstate New York for 6 months, and you're just on a reactor on land, and you're just starting it up and shutting it down, starting it up and shutting it down, going through all kinds of, hey, what if this happens? What if this happens? What if this happens? And you're doing it. You're learning all the different watch standing positions that all your guys and gals are going to be doing when you get to the ship. So you kind of have a little bit of real world experience on what it's like to take notes on what the gauges are doing, and if this happens, here's my job, and all the basically you're preparing for all the things that could go wrong on a nuclear reactor. And then you go to your actual ship. I went to the USS George Washington, and you go through it all again. You learn how the reactor specifically works on that ship, and you're given a job. I had the mechanics on that ship, and when you're not helping your division make sure all the mechanical components are running appropriately, you're the watch officer who's in charge of the safe operation of the reactor for a certain period of time each day.
Fascinating. I imagine that getting both of these jobs was very different than getting jobs in the private sector, the corporate world. Just for the sake of the folks out there who might not have the experience within the United States military or any of these academies, what was it like to go from completing your classes at the Naval Academy, completing your degree, to thinking about which of the thousands of jobs you might be able to hold within the Navy? How did that actually play out? And then what was that promotion like?
So within the Navy, it's funny. Your major doesn't really have much to do with what your job is when you graduate. What you get to choose, when you're at some point your senior year, you get to put in, hey, I want to be a Marine, or if I can't be a Marine, I want to be a Navy pilot. If I can't be a Navy pilot, I want to be a surface warfare officer. Your grades determine where your ranking is at the academy. And based on your ranking, the higher your ranking are, the more likely it is that you get to do what you want to do when you graduate. So, you get a lot of guys a lot of guys and gals who, they take, I mean, I guess they take what are historically, I guess, some of the more easier majors to get good grades in. If they really want to be a pilot, well, you better get your grades up. It's really hard to get good grades if you're in mechanical engineering compared to some of the other majors. I'm not going to call anybody out, but there's some of those majors that people would choose were just for the purpose of making sure they got good enough grades so they could get a good ranking and become a pilot.
How interesting. I never would have known that. The process then from your first post to your second role and advancing into the nuclear engineering role, what was that like in terms of, is this like a traditional promotion? Do you apply for a new job? How does that work?
So the joke is, if you can fog a mirror, you can get promoted in the Navy for your first two ranks. It really is more just time and rank than
Sure.
it is any sort of my progression. As getting promoted through the Navy, from a rank perspective, it's just time and rank. But what I did learn is that when you're actually on the ship, there are different jobs that you have, and that's where everybody, your rank is your rank, but your knowledge and your ability to lead is what the commanding officer of the ship is going to put you in a job that is best for you, and that's where there is a little bit of criteria that determines who gets which jobs on the ship.
How interesting. The transition out of the Navy is something that, from a career coaching standpoint, I see as an enormous challenge. Translating your experience from that kind of environment, even though you're perhaps leading a very large team, you're responsible for enormous budgets, you have literally national security secrets that you're responsible for. That's a challenging transition. What was it actually like for you to leave the Navy and begin your career in the private sector?
Oh man, yeah. So it took, it was like, for most folks, I would say it was a little bit bumpy for me, where I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do. I had my priorities by then. By then I was married. We knew we wanted to probably move back to Texas, but as a nuclear engineer, I wanted to get into business. What am I going to do? Because in some instances, like I could go anywhere. I could do whatever I wanted to do. I had and I didn't have like I knew I didn't want to be a nuclear engineer anymore, and the reason was very logical from that. So here's the irony: when you go through the nuclear power program, everything you learn, like the government doesn't release your transcripts. So everything is confidential on everything that you learn. So in order to get my professional engineer's license in Texas, I would have had to gone back to get a master's degree, go back to school. And so I thought, well, geez, if I got to go back to school, I might as well get an MBA so I can lead myself, go get into business and get into what I want to do. And so that was really kind of how I stumbled into my civilian career. Was I found something that was a contractor. Like everybody who gets out of the military that doesn't really know what they want to do, there's plenty of people that are, well, hey man, you're nuclear, come work for me. I'll do some project management, while you figure out what you want to do. So I did that while I was getting my MBA. And while I was at my MBA, that's where I learned the importance really of what I always think you get out of an MBA. Sure, you learn the language of business, but just as important, I think you're building a network of individuals who, for me, I went to UTSA, University of Texas, San Antonio. And so I was making connections and building relationships with people at large institutions and organizations close to San Antonio. And that's really what got my foot in the door to my real career pivot, which was when I got into the mortgage industry.
And I imagine a lot of your fellow veterans can really see themselves in that same story, where had a great, outstanding military career and then had to start all over, right? And had to start from the beginning with not the same level of respect, not the same camaraderie, not being, around people who were equivalently well trained and dedicated, and then the bumpy road out into the corporate world. But then I think, just like many veterans, USAA became a really nice place for you to land, and you spent a decade there. Tell me a little bit about when you started to hit your stride. It sounded like you got to do the rotational program in the beginning and then eventually ended up in product management.
Yeah. So again, I got lucky. USAA was putting together a program. It was a rotational program. And so USAA being a veteran, oriented business, well, let's create a program where we can hire guys and gals who were just like me, who had a lot of great leadership experience, maybe knew a little bit about business, but had no business experience. So I was in my late 20s. I had 5 years of leadership experience, a lot of technical experience, but I didn't have 1 year of experience in financial services. So I didn't check the box on any of the HR, minimum requirements to get an actual job at you. So they created these rotational programs. It was called the Junior Military Officer Career Development Program. And the idea was, all right, Travis, you're going to come in with about a dozen other folks, and we're just going to plop you into whoever wants you and whoever could use you. And you're going to do that for about a year, and then you'll rotate to something else. And you'll do that for about a year. And along the way, you'll eventually just figure out what you want to do. And by then you'll have enough experience that you can apply for, a quote, real job at USAA and find your career path. And that's what I did. And it was perfect for me. And I had always wanted to get into, when I say, financial service is a very general term. In my head, when I thought of financial services, I was really talking about banking and finance. Like that's where I wanted to kind of get into, but I didn't know like what the difference between deposits, credit cards, mortgage, I didn't know how a bank was structured. So I got lucky. So another veteran plucked me out of that rotational program, or chose me, said, hey, I want this guy. And what the project was that we were working on was this new thing. So remember, this was back in 2010, before, Zillow or Trulia or any of those type of sites had really become what they are now. What USAA was building at the time was a digital experience. So a place where if you're a USA member, you go to, it was called Home Circle. You go there to search for your home. And while you're searching for your home on USA.com, you get, you can see how much you can qualify for a mortgage, what your homeowner's policy would look like. We had relationships with real estate agents, and just everything you would need from a USA perspective for that home. So it's a great strategy, right? It's the, that's ultimately what every real estate and mortgage company is still trying to accomplish. Zillow, that's their strategy. Like it's what's the quote, the one-stop shop, right? So I landed in that organization, and it really just exposed me to all the different aspects of purchasing a home. So I got to learn a little bit about homeowners insurance. I got to learn a little bit about mortgage, a little bit about real estate, a little bit about all the other ancillary things that go into it, a little bit about digital, like how to build a digital experience. So there was some IT, there's some project and program management, some finance, experience on like, okay, well, it costs this much to build this feature, so it just was a awesome opportunity for me to just kind of see, from the eagle's nest, like, okay, here's how that organization works. Here's how this organization works. And you kind of see like there's different cultures, within each one of those little organizations, there's different problems to solve. And eventually, that's just for a few different reasons, I chose to go into the mortgage side of things. And that's really what the branch of that experience that drew me into there. And, that's how I got into mortgage.
Was there something specific or a pattern of experiences that you had that led you to believe that mortgage was the right path?
So what I learned going through that experience was the home circle, anybody's home purchasing experience, it is only ever going to be like what really drives the emotion of it is the mortgage experience behind the scenes. And I saw like you can't have a great home purchase experience if the mortgage experience is bad. And so that really kind of resonated with me like, oh, well, and then I started learning more about the mortgage business. And it's not just about, sales and getting somebody into a conventional or VA loan. Then you got like operations, how to process loans, how to underwrite. And then you got like the capital market side, like so now we close a loan, what happens with it? How it like goes to investors, like all this. And it just fascinated me there were like little industries within the mortgage industry. And so I don't know what, it just drew me, it drew me in because I saw that, man, I can go a lot of different places if I get into the mortgage business in a lot of different directions. And at the end of the day, it seems like it's a very impactful experience in a home in anybody's life. Everybody who's buying a home for, 90% of the time you're getting a mortgage. So like, it seems like it's a relevant, pretty stable type of industry to get into, whereas like people are always going to be borrowing money to buy houses. So, for all those different reasons, that's really what piqued my interest and what kind of led me into the industry.
What makes a bad mortgage experience?
I always say the best mortgage companies, the best mortgage experiences just don't suck. Right. So that's all you have to do. You just don't suck. And so if you think about a emotional journey, think about kind of on this horizontal line, from when we're so, it starts with, okay, we got a contract on a house. We're excited to move in. It's going to take 30 to 45 days to get through the mortgage experience. So it starts off, it's really kind of exciting. You're thinking through like moving day and what this house is going to look like. And then like, it just has a gradual decline as you start to like, oh, I got to send in this paperwork and I got to send this in. And then like you get handed off and somebody asks you for the same thing again. And it's just like, okay, here's this again. I send it to you, and just it starts to kind of suck, right? The experience does. But then like things go dark for a couple of weeks while you're in processing and underwriting. You don't know what's happening behind the scenes, but the mortgage people are doing the mortgage stuff. And then, inevitably 2 weeks before you're supposed to close, you call in and it's like, hey, I haven't heard. Is everything on? Yeah, everything's good. Everything. Don't worry. We're supposed to close. Yeah, we're good to close in a couple of weeks. And then a week before you're supposed to close, your loan officer or somebody calls you. It's like, hey, we got a problem. It's like, well, what do you mean you got a problem? Well, I need you to, send in, a justification for this thing, or, there's always something comes up. And so then what do? You're like, well, are we going to close? Am I going to be able to move? I got my movers coming. My folks are coming in town to watch the kids. Like you start to panic. And so like your emotional journey starts to decline. Like now this is like, it sucks, right? Like it adds all this anxiety to what should be an exciting time. And then inevitably what happens is a few days before you close, oh, we got everything ironed out. Everything is good to go. Okay, we'll see you Friday at 3 p.m. at the title company to close. And so, okay, well, great. Are you sure? Because like 2 days ago, everything was. So that's when I say, like, just don't suck. Don't do that. If you're a mortgage company, just create a process that doesn't create all this anxiety for your borrowers right up, before they're supposed to close. It's funny when you describe it that way, but if you've gone through that process, my goodness, man, like and then you got your real estate agents that are, they're relying on their commission. Like that's how they make money. There's just a ripple effect on all of that. And, that's really, fast forward, that's, why we decided to start Novum is like, it's not that hard. If you just know the right technology to use, you build the right culture, you do your training, you have good discipline, good execution. It doesn't have to be like that. So like the whole 15 years, of me, the decade I was at USAA. And then, since I was there, I've been to a couple other places. I've just really seen that kind of journey of emotion, is kind of how the whole mortgage industry can impact the home, a significant emotional event that home buyers go through. And that's what's really always drawn me and kept me in the mortgage industry.
How interesting. I always thought that that process was that kind of, I thought it was kind of baked in, almost like intentional friction to soften up the borrower to make sure that they would do whatever the bank needed at the very last minute.
The best mortgage company. That's why I joke, but I think it's true. The best mortgage company just don't suck. Don't have that emotional anxiety. In the last 2 weeks leading up, just handle. Here's the other thing that it comes down to expectations. Like set the expectation up front. Hey, if you send in all these things, like you should be able to uncover. If you're working with somebody who really knows their stuff, you should be able to uncover any potential issues like early on in the process, and then you can handle. Good news, or I'm sorry, bad news doesn't get better with time. And that's what a lot of, unfortunately, a lot in this industry, they just say, oh, well, hopefully it'll solve itself or somebody else will figure out, how it inevitably leads you up to a week before closing and stuff blows up.
How interesting. To think about the transition and the evolution that you had in the corporate stretch before you started your own business, were there any specific skills that you didn't arrive equipped with from your prior experience that took some work for you to master?
And that's a great question. I would say the deeper I got into the mortgage industry, the more I learned of what I didn't know. And it is just such a complicated business that I kind of I learned, and this is where I fell back on my leadership experiences from the Navy. Is like I can't run a nuclear reactor on my own. Just like you can't run a mortgage company on your own. You need somebody who knows, in the mortgage industry, you need somebody who knows capital markets, who understands the like underwriting guidelines, who understands technology and what the right tools are, and nobody can know all of those things. That's what took me 15 years to realize is you got to surround yourself with people who can fill those gaps and, build and create a cohesive team if you want to build a great mortgage company. Just like, all the way back what I learned in nuclear power, it comes down to a great watch team of 30 individuals who know their job really well and know how to support. Everybody knows what they're supposed to do. There's role clarity and there's a support structure of how the whole team works together. And it's not one individual that's going to, that's going to help make it happen. It's just a collective team effort to make it successful.
As you got further along the curve of kind of awareness and realizing how little you did indeed know, were there any painful moments along the way where it's like, wow, I'm actually out of my depth? And what did you do to kind of get up to speed and see things through?
There's countless examples of just, you realize, oh man, this is so much more complicated than I thought it was. Oh man, I'm drawing a blank. I think it's called the Kruger something effect. There's this, you know, graph that shows if the more you learn, you think, as time goes on, you read some articles, you start to dig. It's like, oh, this isn't that complicated. And then you really get into it. And it's like, oh, wait, this is a lot more complicated than I thought. And then all of a sudden, like it goes way, your confidence goes way down. And then as you keep digging into it, it gradually starts to climb back up. Right. And so I have experienced that so many times in the mortgage industry. When I first got in at USAA, it was, oh, it seems pretty, yeah, you search for a home, you get a mortgage. And then it's like, well, you get pre-approved for a mortgage. Well, what does that mean? Well, there's different types of pre-approvals. So then you could just go down the rabbit hole and all the different nuances of getting pre-approved in a mortgage. And so then you get into the real estate side of things. And you start to like, oh, all agents do is they just open the door for you. There's not much. Well, or really? Because they're like, have you ever gone through, like, what happens if an inspector comes in and there's negotiations? There's all kinds of details there. Things can go really bad for you if you don't have a good real estate agent. So you could go down that rabbit hole. And like, I'm not even getting into homeowners insurance or all the other things that kind of get. So the more I learned, like it is just the industry, also the mortgage industry. For me, it creates humility, because the more you dig into something, the more you realize, oh man, this is a lot more complicated. I need somebody who really knows what they're doing to help get me out of trouble before I ignorantly make a wrong decision here.
And a brilliant demonstration of the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Dunning-Kruger. Thank you.
Yeah, well said. As we think about your work today, we'll talk about your company in here in a moment and your role there within, but in a broader, perhaps more philosophical perspective, what does your work mean to you?
Oh, wow. I guess the best way to answer that question is I had to go through a self realization a few years ago. This is after I left USAA. I thought I was ready to start my own company, and I learned I wasn't. And, things evolved to where I was kind of at this pivot point in my career where I needed to really think, what do I like? Okay, I've kind of done the corporate executive thing. I stumbled into the entrepreneurship space and learned, okay, I'm not ready. So like, what do? I go back to being an executive? Do I like grind it out on the entrepreneurial side? Well, what I did is I relied on my mentors. I've had some great mentors through my life. And they said, dude, you just need to sit, like, what do you want? Like, write it down. What is important to you? And it was the first time, this was 4 or 5 years ago. It was the first time I really like sat down and had that like introspective, like, okay, what do I really want to do in my life? Like with my career, factor in, I have 3 boys, what does my family life look like? Like, what am I trying to accomplish? And what that helped me realize is, first off, there's the work-life balance. How much do you want? How much of your time do you want? Are you comfortable traveling a lot? Do you want to be home and help coach your kids' baseball team? Like, what's important to you? Because you can't have it both ways, and you need to define like like those types of things. What's most important to you? From a financial perspective, how much money do you really need? Like, I had to think through that. I was like, man, if I could wave a magic wand, is it 1 million? Is it 10 million? Is it 100 million? Like, those are very important distinctions of what you need to think through. And so I had to think through like all that type of stuff. Right. I guess this is a long way to answer your question, but from a leadership and a career development, like, what do I want to do? I wanted to own something, put my name, not literally my name, but put my name behind building something that I could feel proud of. But where I found over the years that I really felt the best in my career was when I was able to help somebody else accomplish their goals. And that was what I realized, like, man, if I could create an organization, sure, it's probably going to be a mortgage company because that's what I know, and help people who wanted to achieve greatness achieve that greatness, man, that gets me jazzed. Like that's what I really wanted to do, and that's what I found like is very important to me. That's a part of what we're doing at Novum, right? Is we want to find folks who are kind of in that stage of, okay, I'm pretty good at what I do, but I know I can be a lot better, and I just need help getting there. That's the type of person we're looking for, and that's the type of company we're building. Is how to get and that's really where me and my 2 co-founders. That's why we're doing this. It's not this, and sure, like we'll benefit from helping those people be successful too, but that's not why we're doing it. It really truly is. It sounds cheap, but it feels good to help people accomplish their goals and to help them like first identify their goals and then give them a plan on how to do that and like support them to do it. Like that's what I wanted to do. It took me a long time to realize I needed to do some self-reflection to understand that was what I wanted to do with my life.
Beautiful. So well said. We'll get back to the conversation shortly, but I wanted to tell you about how I can help you find your fit. I offer one-on-one career coaching services for experienced professionals who are preparing to find and land their next role. If you're a director, vice president, or a C-suite executive, and you're ready to explore new opportunities, please go to goodfitcareers.com to apply for a free consultation. I also occasionally send a newsletter which includes stories from professionals who have found their fit, strategies and insights that might be helpful in your job search, and content that I found particularly useful or interesting. If you'd like to learn more, check out goodfitcareers.com and follow me on LinkedIn. Now, back to the conversation. It reminds me, a mentor of mine, Steve Gatter, once shared with me several years ago the concept of ikigai. And it's a Japanese concept, Ikigai. And it's this intersection of a 4-circle Venn diagram for what you love to do, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can get paid for. And at the intersection of those 4 circles is, I think, what you just beautifully described. And I think that for folks out there who are trying to figure out, what do I want to do? I think you did a very, very nice job, Travis, on describing how that comes to be in reality. And perhaps even without knowing that concept, you embody it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I think your mentor probably described it more succinctly and clearer than I did. I appreciate that. But another tool that I found was helpful in my journey that I picked up again from another mentor. Pick 3 people. Whose job do you want? Like, pick 3 specific people and put their names down. Like, I want to do that guy, that lady, and that lady. So, like, I want if I could be doing one of those 3 things, I would be happy. Now you have a very practical goal to accomplish. I want to be, if you're at USAA, I want to be the bank president. I want, whoever the bank president, I want, put his or her name down. For me personally, I realized I didn't want, over time, my goal evolved from, I didn't want to be a corporate executive. I wanted to be some of these other mentors that I have now they own their own business. They're business leaders. They kind of do a lot of, a few different things. And my goals changed, when I started to realize who I wanted to aspire to be like. But then so what's important there is, okay, once you realize who you want to be, let's use the bank president example. Okay, well, how did he become the bank president? Well, he had 2 or 3 years of operational experience before then, or he was the CFO before then. Okay, well, if I want to be the bank president, I got to learn how do I get the CFO job for a couple of years? Well, if I want the CFO job, I got to get into finance. And if I want to get into finance, I got to start to beef up my, it's like, and so you start to build a career roadmap, a very practical, like, here are the things I need to start to do to set myself up for that long-term goal. And here are some specific people even that I needed to start to reach out to as mentors to help me get on my path. And the other important thing I've learned through my career is, and it's humans working with humans. If you want to do something in some organization, somebody find that example and put your goal out there, to state it out there in the universe, and people will help you. Even if it's not that one individual person that you want to be like, somebody who's along that path, along that same path, but ahead of you will here's what I did. Everybody loves being a mentor. So ask people for mentors. And I thought that was a pretty valuable lesson that I learned, again, luckily, a long time ago in my career. Find those specific people whose job you want, and then just lay out their, how did they get there? And then try to recreate their path.
That's great advice. It sounds like you were describing this development of your own career path, or this roadmap, as also establishing the ideal pattern of experience that whoever might be hiring you would be looking for from a skills and experiences standpoint. What you're saying, or at least what I'm hearing, is that by taking the time to be deliberate about, this is the destination that I really want, and then analyzing the pattern of the experience that the people have followed to get there, it might make it easier for you to figure out your own roadmap of skills and experiences that you have to develop to get to your desired destination.
So I've had a lot of failures in my career, but one thing that I did do that I think really set me up for success was, again, back in my early USAA days, I knew I wanted to get into the mortgage business, but I had no mortgage experience. So what I did is I reached out to the guy back then who ran the mortgage company and said, hey, I want I want to be a mortgage person. Like help guide, like, what do I need to do in order to, and I would set up monthly, you know, ish recurring meetings with him. And I asked, like, who are some good executives that you think would help mentor me and guide me along the way? And I reached out to them and set up like, hey, and I told them, I want to be I want to be a mortgage person. I want, like, help me understand what I need to do to get into this business. And that's what I call creating your own luck, because then all of a sudden a director position opens up. And I had been for a year talking to all the different executives in the organization. Hey, maybe Travis would be a good fit for that role. And that's exactly how I got into the mortgage business. Everybody from the outside looking in was, man, how lucky there's a perfect position for you that opened up. And it's like, well, maybe that was because they knew I wanted to get in, and it was, they created that position for me. So at the end of the day, humans are going to help other humans. You got to find the human connections to get on that path. And that was one thing that I did that I think really helped me in my career, was just stating your goal out there and reaching out to the individuals who can help you get there. And that's how you create your own luck.
Tremendous. Thank you for sharing that. Something that I admire so very much about your career is your resilience and your perseverance. Coming out of the Navy, there were a couple of rough steps before you've hit your stride and found USAA. And it sounds like the same pattern held true for your departure from USAA and where you are today. Can you tell us a little bit about what your first couple of steps were in entrepreneurship that led you to where you are now?
So when I left USAA, my first steps into the entrepreneurial business were, first off, it was just having the guts to leave a corporate executive job. I mean, that's a tough emotional thing to get over. And my wife Jen she was extremely supportive of me, and that is, don't underestimate the support you need at home if you want to jump into entrepreneurship, because it's going to be bumpy. Nobody ever has, oh man, yeah, it's just real easy. I started my own company and it was cake the whole time. Like, you're going to need some support at home to help you emotionally get through that. The other thing that I found is it's really hard to do it yourself. So I say I left USA. I left with another one of my business partners, Tad Hensley. He was running capital markets at USAA. I was, not. I was doing something else at USAA. But he and I just started talking. It's funny, like we worked out in the gym together for years, and we found ourselves just talking in the locker room afterwards. Like, man, we could just mortgage. What if we created a mortgage company like this? And we did, and that eventually led to, an opportunity. We were like, all right, let's go do this. Let's jump in there. What we realized, though, is there is no preparation for just jumping into the deep end of entrepreneurship that we could have, expect. It was just so, we thought we knew how to be entrepreneurs, and we thought we had, like, the risk managed appropriately. But man, it is a lot more difficult than we prepared ourselves for. So that is kind of where we jumped into the deep end of starting our own thing. And then we kind of got lucky and thrown, like we ended up at another startup. We kind of got acqui-hired, so to speak. And that's where, we had, okay, well, now we at least are getting paid, and somebody else raised money. We're going to go help build their vision. But it was kind of like a much safer on-ramp for us into the entrepreneurial space. And we learned so that Tad stayed there for a couple of years. I moved to Keller Williams, where I learned their whole catchphrase is, where entrepreneurs thrive, at Keller Williams. So again, at Keller Williams, I had the safety of having a executive job, but I was able to observe real entrepreneurs, and I learned how to be an entrepreneur at Keller Williams much more than I did, I really would have struggled trying to figure all those things out on my own. But I was able to get a really bird's eye view of true successful entrepreneurs. And I learned I found some other examples of people I wanted to be like, people who had started their own companies and had, like, built them from the ground up. And that's who, even with Novum, that's who we're relying on as our mentors, who give us advice on how to go do this entrepreneur thing.
Awesome. Another healthy dose of the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's a perfect. That is a perfect example. Yes. I wish there was some way that you could just kind of accelerate your way over that peak of Mount Stupid on the Dunning-Kruger effect.
For better or worse, I think that's the value of experience. We all have to see our way through. One of the terms that I use with my clients is kind of the opposite of the Dunning-Kruger is the long valley of despair. And thinking about, you start your journey with some set of perceptions, and then you get into the valley and you realize, wow, this is a heck of a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. And how you decide to see your way through and cross the river in the middle of that gorge, that tends to define us and helps us build who we want to be.
Yeah. And here's the other thing that I learned though. On the flip side, yeah, it is risky, but it's never going to happen if you don't take that. You got to do it. You just got to jump into the deep end, and it's going like prepare yourself for how bad it's going to be. And we weren't appropriately prepared. But now, at what I learned at Keller Williams and what Tad learned where he was at in our third co-founder, where he has this experience now. His name's Don Conwell. He's a phenomenal person. We are much more informed and much more prepared to handle the bumps that we know are going to happen. So there is a heavy dose of reality in our financial forecasts and our expectations. And we use the analogy of, yeah, we're telling a story of what we want to accomplish. But the reality is we got to get out of Earth's atmosphere before we worry about which star we're pointed at with our vision. And you got to really get practical on, okay, how are you going to get your first 20 loans? Where are those going to come from? Because you look at, oh yeah, we could do 20 in 6 months. Like, okay, which ones? Where are they going to go? Like, if you got to really dig down and deep and ask yourself some tough questions, that that those are some of the valuable things that we learned along the ways that have kind of, I guess, better prepared us to be aware of the risks that we're taking now that we're jumping into starting our own thing.
How exciting. Great segue over into the business. Tell me a little bit about Novum Home Loans. Tell me about your role therein and walk me through what the business does.
Yeah. So I think the three of us, Tad, Don, and I, came at it from different perspectives. So I came from Keller Williams most recently, where I saw the importance of the relationship that real estate agents and loan officers have. If you don't, there's no mortgage company that is successful without good relationships between their loan officers and real estate agents. So I learned the importance of that. Tad came from the fintech world where he learned some valuable lessons. It's tough to speak for Tad because he's a genius when it comes to this stuff, but there's no magic button that's going to be invented to solve the mortgage problem. We believe that there's innovation and complex coordination. And we use the analogy of Tesla as kind of the example that we're trying to follow of there's nothing in a Tesla car that in particular is intellectual property. Like GM, Ford, everybody has the same access to all the same parts. What makes Tesla such a interesting company is their manufacturing process. They can coordinate the complexity of putting an electric car together much more efficiently than any of their peers. And all their peers have all these legacy systems and all these legacy processes that they can't untangle from. And that's where Tesla really benefits is they started fresh from new. And that's Novum is Latin for new beginnings. And that's where we are a seedling who is emerging from the forest fire that is going through the mortgage industry right now. And we don't have any of that legacy tech or any of those legacy processes. We are something totally new. And so, Tesla is the example that we look at as like how we think of innovation. We think of innovation through complex coordination. And then lastly, the third part of Novum is what Don Conwell, who is just a highly respected loan officer who just knows production, how to provide advice in a transparent, trusting way, just an unbelievable human being. So like culture is a big part of what Don brings to the table. I don't want to overlook that. But more importantly, what he has brought is this perspective in the mortgage industry that loan officers are seeking refuge from the flames that are going through right now. And they're looking for something new to believe in. And at the end of the day, they just don't trust their lenders. And there's a lot of reasons why, lenders, if you look at what's happening, they're just inefficient. And what that means is, they take away operation support for loan officers. They take away their growth opportunities. And then worst case scenario, they're starting to mess with some of their compensation plans of, hey, we can't afford to pay you what we thought we could pay you. So all of that is just leading to this like all-time low of trust between loan officers and their lenders. So you bring those three things together, right? Of, my perspective of the relationship between loan officers and real estate agents and marketing, how to help somebody grow and build a brand. Tad from the tech, from the fintech side of what he's learned of how to think through innovation, and then Don from the practical side of culture and building a process and a team and an organization around trust. That's really like all three of those things kind of came at the idea of Novum from those three different perspectives, and that's really what's shaping it. And to be honest, it's we're still in year one, and so we have this idea of what we want to accomplish, what we want to do. We've also learned that, man, we just need to keep trying things and keep like, it's cliche to sound, but you got to fail forward. You got to keep moving. You're like a shark, in the water. Like you just got to keep moving. Got to keep like, that's the biggest difference also that, we got from our corporate experience days is you got to keep trying things and got to be comfortable screwing things up, because that's the only way that you're going to learn what works or what doesn't work is, just getting out there and trying. Those three perspectives that Tad, Don, and I have is really what brought Novum together.
That makes sense. Would you paint the picture for me and tell me about your vision of what you believe the process of getting a mortgage and buying your first, second, or third home, what should that experience actually look like?
That's a great question. So first off, buying a home, it's one of the most significant emotional and financial decisions that anybody makes. My personal opinion, I believe the real estate agent is who really steps in to manage the emotional side of the experience, right? Hey, does this house have is it in the right neighborhood? With the neighbors, like all those emotional aspects of it. The finance side should not impact the emotional side of the experience. And so what that means for us is, first off, we need to do a really good job of making sure that the home buyer, the agent, and us, there's clear communication. There's no telephone game. Everybody's on the same page. So that's critically important to us, is communication and making sure that we are keeping the client's emotions at the forefront and being empathetic for what they're going through. And quite frankly, the real estate agent too, and what they're going through. They're trying to manage those emotions, and they don't have to, like, man, if you don't ask me like what's going on with their asset verification, like all these mortgage stuff, like manage your part, your part. And then you get into kind of the mechanics of how the mortgage transaction works, which is where we believe there's a lot of room for improvement there, where there's a lot of modern tools that are available that can help that experience be so much easier for our clients, to where it doesn't need to be as paper heavy and as manual as possible. And really where the trick is there on the back end is you got to build a really good process for our employees. So the loan officer, the processors, the underwriters, the closer, everybody, like if you make their lives easier, that's going to translate to an easier transaction for the client, and everything's just going to go more smoothly for everybody. They'll be able to focus on the emotional side of the experience, and the financing thing kind of goes back to what I was joking about before. Like you just don't suck, like don't create any of that emotional like valleys in the process. Like there's no, most mortgage companies also, I think they miss the point. I want to create this beautiful mortgage experience that nobody's going to be happy with their mortgage. Like that's not, that you're trying to solve the wrong problem, right? Like who is going to go through their mortgage experience just like, oh my gosh, that was just so beautiful. I loved it. Like
Better than a spa day, right?
Yeah. Like what? No, you're trying to like, just like make it easy behind the scenes and support that emotional journey. And you're not like the mortgage company, you're not the star of the show. You're in the background helping support the emotion that the client's going through and helping support that real estate agent. And if you build process and you build everything from that perspective, that's what we're doing at Novum. And I think we come from, again, from our experience. I think we're I think we're onto something, just based on how things are going in the first year.
Wonderful. How do you believe the world sees or perceives lenders and mortgage companies?
What's interesting is, folks from our, the Gen X millennial generation was very impacted by the great, by 2008. And I think that still has there's still, that's still resonating through most first time home buyers, repeat buyers, folks that are trying to move up. What's interesting is if you look at this new generation that's coming up, they were little kids in 2008. And so if you start to think about the next generation of first time home buyers, they don't have a negative perspective of the mortgage industry because they weren't old enough to realize like what happened back then. And it's interesting that it's almost worse because they really don't have any perspective, at least like millennials, the millennial generation and the Gen X generation, they're aware. And so they ask better questions, they kind of know what they don't know, generally speaking. The other, this newer generation coming up, like they don't even like what's a mortgage? What like do I really need? Like it's really interesting to just kind of see like for the last 15 years, everybody's been kind of on this like the 2008 financial crisis is really what steered a lot of the experience and how people think of mortgage. But there's this new generation that's starting to emerge who they don't have that stigma around it, and it'll be interesting to see how the industry evolves. Once they all start buying homes here over the next 5 to 10 years.
Sure. Oh, that is going to be fascinating. Are there any misconceptions that you commonly see about your job being either a founder or leading a mortgage company?
That's a really good question. I think it would go back again to, just the misperceptions of what it's like to start a company. And it's not glamorous by any means. And I think a lot of people get enamored with the romanticism of, being an entrepreneur and starting their own company. But the practicality is you're the last one to get paid. There's nobody to delegate anything to. There's no task that's too small for you to be involved in. Like there's no, like, you don't just, hey, it's Friday at 5, I'm going to go home and everything. Like things don't get done unless you do them. And so I think that's probably the biggest misperception that I see are folks who just think of starting your own company. And what we're doing at Novum, like we are grinding it out, man. We are like building the back end, and it is a lot of grunt work, and it's a lot of work, right? And it's kind of nice from the outside looking in. We're like, oh, you guys are doing great. You keep grinding it out. It's like, but man, it's tiring when you're, and there's a lot more work to do, and it just never really ends. So, once you're on that train, you better be ready. And that's another thing we learned, from our past experiences. We have set our expectations that, hey, this is going to be a long journey. There's no big payoff that's coming out, in the next year or two. Like this is like we are building for long-term generational growth, and it's going to take some time to build this the right way, and that is not as glamorous as a lot of folks seem to think.
As you begin to build your team and grow your company and hire new team members, let's just say the people out there listening today are excited about working with you or excited about working with someone like you. Would you tell me a little bit about how you approach hiring and evaluating candidates that you might bring onto your company?
Man, I love that question. So, of course I've always, integrity, try, that's absolutely table stakes. You got to have that. I have always, found the second quality that I look for is curiosity. And I've always found that people who ask good questions, when I'm in an interview, I'm more interested not in their answers to my questions, but what questions they're asking me. Because it kind of tells me what their priorities are, how they think, and the advice I would give folks is I'm always looking for curious people, because curious people are the ones who are going to find the root cause of problems. They're not just going to solve symptoms of the problems. And, I think that's what I've always found are the type of people that I really, really like having on my team are people who don't like, they're not going to, sounds weird to say it, but they're not going to listen to me. They're going to like have a questioning even attitude of what I say. And they're going to be curious, like, okay, well, why did that's what I want. Like find my blind spots and fill those gaps and ask the questions that I don't even realize I should be asking. That's like a really valuable trait that I found, that high performers have, is that curious, questioning attitude. And it doesn't have to be skeptical. There's a difference, right, between being skeptical and being curious. You can come at it from a empathetic, sympathetic, perspective, but just always don't be satisfied with an answer until you've really kind of dug into it and understood what it's really getting at.
Makes a lot of sense. For other people out there who also agree that integrity and trust are table stakes, are there any questions or ways of evaluating that you found to be particularly a good, consistent, like a high precision read on that specific category?
I mean, I hate to say it, I think there is something innate in humans' abilities to, I'll say my gut's been wrong in the past, and I've paid for that. So it's the way that I try to build a case of, can I trust this person, is I rely on other humans. And it's like there may be something that I'm missing, and they may be a really good BSer, that I'm, and I feel like I have a good BS meter, but some people slip some fastballs by me. I love the idea of just go out to lunch with this person, just see what kind of person they are. Yeah, like it's all those little things, and that's really where of how they, how they're going to treat the waiter, what they're, how they're going to, what type of conversation they're going to strike up, what their personal life is like. You're trying to just understand what kind of person this is, like what kind of question, like, is this somebody that I can trust, and like, do they pass the sniff test? And there's no, at least I haven't found a good metric. It's just much more of a softer skill, and just trusting your gut on, hey, do I trust this person? And at the end of the day, you're the hiring manager. If you don't trust the person, you don't need a reason to not to hire them, just because, like if you don't trust them, like don't try to find a reason to trust them, like just go with your gut.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Something that I learned along the my experience with hiring that helped me gain that last little bit of confidence that I needed to make a hiring decision was a reference. And I think that some people don't necessarily take references as seriously today as we can. One of the ways that I found was very helpful in evaluating trust was trying to figure out what sort of reputation the person you're about to hire left behind. And one of my favorite ways to do this was I would ask them for someone above them, so a manager. I would ask for two peers, people who worked alongside them, and then a subordinate if I was hiring somebody who was a manager. And instead of just calling and saying, hey, do you respect this person? Do you like them? Which are real softballs, right? For a reference. You're not going to volunteer someone who's not going to say nice things about you. I would always try to spend time with those references to understand what was it actually like to work with this person? What happened when things didn't go well, right? How did you approach correcting issues or teaching them things when there were failures or real issues? And how did they receive that feedback? What did they do with it? So perhaps for folks out there who are trying to figure out, how do I establish this trust? How do I think about refining my process? Something that might be overlooked is just the concept of a real in-depth reference, right? And to help set you up for success, say, how can I get up to speed and manage this person with grace? You'd be surprised at the answers you might get.
Totally agree. And another trick that I've always done is, I've always viewed references as that's as good of a perspective as you're going to get on the person. So, again, it kind of goes back to the humans that they've interacted with in the past, and doing your own research to find somebody that they've interacted with that's not on their list of references. Hey, what was this person like? They didn't put you as the like, so why did they not put you on the list? And don't be judgmental, but because sometimes like personalities just don't gel. So take some of the feedback with a grain of salt, but really get a good diverse perspective on what that person's like as a person. And that's where, again, if you're trying to get a job, make your own connections, like find ways that you can kind of get ahead of that, so that when a job posting comes up in an organization that you want to be a part of, you've already done the groundwork of people know who you are and they trust you and they know what your capabilities are. Create your own luck. Like go do that and call your shot. Hey, I want to be in this organization, and then do that with 3 other organizations and see what comes available.
Love it. When we're thinking about the future and where your industry is headed, where you're headed personally, where we as humanity on this rock are all headed, what are you excited about for the future?
Oh wow, that's a big one. I don't want to put my tinfoil hat on and talk too much about AI. But I'll talk about kind of the near term future, because like, who the hell knows what's going to happen in 50 years from now, right? But I think In particular, this is where we're thinking of leveraging AI even for in the mortgage space. A lot of folks think of AI from a perspective of cost avoidance, right? Like how do in the mortgage space, how do I use like an automated like AI for an underwriter, and like they're trying to take expense out. But what we're trying to figure out is how do you use AI for those revenue driving pieces of the puzzle? And some of the practical things that we're going to test out AI is communication. And I don't mean like chatbot communication. I mean like, so here's an example of something that we're building and that we're testing out. And so far we've had some good preliminary results from it. You have all this telephone game that seems to happen in the mortgage business, right? Hey, a client reaches out to a loan officer, they send them this document. Hey, the loan officer has to tell the processor that I had this. Hey, this came in, but here's some specific thing you need to know about the document that was sent in, and the processor has to tell the underwriter. And there's a telephone game that happens. What happens if you could just have cohesive conversation with all of those individuals, and AI creates a summary at the end of the day of, hey, here Johnny did this, Sally did this talked about this, the next step was, and everybody's on the same page. And you're leveraging AI to have that coordinated communication summary at the end of the day. That's one of those little examples of where we believe AI can really be leveraged to provide value. Where now, clients always ask for a single point of contact in the mortgage business and in the mortgage experience, right? Why is that? Because they don't want to talk to the same, they don't want to have the same conversation over and over again. So what do most mortgage companies do? They solve the symptom. Oh, we're going to give you one point of contact who's now responsible for the telephone game, right? They have to communicate everything to everybody else. That's where we believe AI can solve that problem. That's getting at the root problem. They're not asking for a single point of contact per se. They just don't want to have to repeat themselves over and over again to different individuals. So if you can leverage AI to help all your teammates stay on the same page of the conversations that you're having with the client, that is a way that AI can provide real value to your organization, help everybody stay more efficient, right? And can your loan officers have more time instead of playing the telephone game and getting into operations, making sure things are happening. They can go talk to more clients and provide more emotional support, more advice to their clients and to real estate agents. But I think that is much more exciting of like how technology and advancements, particularly around AI, how they can really practically make people's lives easier, not replace jobs, but just like be a tool to help people be better at what they're doing. So I think that the future is going to be much more of that, is I guess the summary. Like I think the people that learn how to embrace technology and learn how to use it to help them be better are going to thrive. The people who reject it because they view it from a defensive posture of like they're coming to take something away from me, I don't think that's the way that you should be thinking about the future.
That's great. Thinking about folks who might want to become an entrepreneur, might want to start their own mortgage company, might want to get into lending in a more broad sense, what sort of advice or inspiration do you have for them?
Find some mentors. Somebody has done this before in a way that you can copy their path. And when I say copy their path, like they are like, don't be so arrogant that you don't think you can, like, especially to get things going, like rely on personal relationships. If you want to get into the entrepreneurial game, it's going to succeed because of your personal relationships. And so be humble enough where you're seeking advice from a lot of people who have done it before and who have the dents in the helmet, and learn from those dents in the helmet and follow their path. That is, it doesn't have to be more complicated than that. And there's a lot of good literature that's even out there of people who have like, hey, here's where I screwed up in the past. Don't do it like I did it here. Do it like this, and take their advice. Be humble enough that you can, don't think you need to recreate the wheel when the path to success in those first 6 to 12 months has already been laid out.
That's a great perspective. Thank you for sharing that. This is your stage. Is there anything that you would like to promote or let people know about? Anything that we skimmed over that you'd like to revisit?
No, I just really appreciate the opportunity. What I found also is it's just opportunities like this for me. It's, with Novum, like everything changes so quickly in the startup space when you're starting a company. that I find myself describing Novum differently. If you'd had asked me about Novum 2 or 3 weeks ago, I probably would have had a little bit of a different, spin on what we're doing. But, because it just gets clearer and clearer and clearer. And so that's what I'd leave people with who are trying to get into the entrepreneurial space is be flexible enough that, okay, we have an idea what we want to do, but the path to get there is going to wind. And so let it wind and be comfortable with it changing, and don't try to force it into this clear, nice little linear path, because that you're creating unnecessary guardrails for yourself. Let it bounce around and be comfortable in that journey of trying to figure it out as you go. And, that's, I guess, the biggest lesson I've learned moving from corporate world into the entrepreneurial space is you got to be comfortable in ambiguity, and just don't do it if you're not comfortable in ambiguity. Learn to have fun doing it and set yourself up to where you can manage the risks that come from that.
Tremendous. Travis, thank you for joining me. Thank you for sharing your perspective. You did a great job.
Thanks so much, Ryan. This was fun. Appreciate you having me.
Our next episode is with Sharon Love, Chief Executive Officer of Cordance.
You get a lot more no's than yeses. That's the definition of a job hunt. Those no's are not about you.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe for new episodes, leave a review, and tell a friend. Good Fit Careers is hosted by me, Ryan Dickerson, and is produced and edited by Mellow Vox Productions. Marketing is by Story Angled, and our theme music is by Surftronica, with additional music from Andrew Esperanceda. I'd like to express my gratitude to all of our guests for sharing their time, stories, and perspectives with us. And finally, thank you to all of our listeners. If you have any recommendations on future guests, questions, or comments, please send us an email at hello@goodfitcareers.com.